Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you to everyone for being here in this moment of practice. Good afternoon to those of us for whom it's afternoon. Good morning to some of us and good evening to others of us. And Chodesh Tov to all of us as the new month of Tammuz is about to approach. And so the teaching I want to offer this day is related to the next month of Tammuz, the coming period that we're going to be going through called the 3 weeks, which also is known as Bein HaMitzarim, between the straits, or between the narrows. I want to connect that to a beautiful teaching from the Piazetzner Rabbi, who some of you who have learned, I'm sure, before, and really then tie it up to the moment that we are in now. So I want to begin by acknowledging that these last few weeks, many of us have felt an elevated sense of fear and anxiety and uncertainty and fragility for a lot of different and complicated reasons. But that has been in our lived experience for a while. I know for me, when those kind of feelings arise, I feel a sense of constriction. I feel a sense of unease and a sense of jumpiness. And I know when those things arise, if I'm able to catch it, I know that there's something in me that's being activated. I know that there's some kind of response that's being activated, that I'm getting a signal that's telling me this is danger. There's danger here. There's fear here. There's anxiety here. And sometimes, if I'm not careful, I can continue on those cycles. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one in this room who can relate to this. It's very easy to continue that cycle of fear and anxiety because it is a very contagious and easily accessible cycle. All the more so, in my own experience, when we are physically apart. Baruch Hashem, for many of us, we are in a new phase of the pandemic now, but nevertheless, we're still in different places of feeling able to interact with the outside world, figuring out what our own comfort level is. And we hold also simultaneously that there are people, I'm sure, in this room and in many places in the world for whom there is not a new phase of the pandemic. Things have not continued to progress. And so we hold all of those truths. And even still, as we are moving into a new normal, we are experiencing so many ways in which there is fear and brokenness and anxiety. And it can feel overwhelming, as though those emotions are coming at us so rapidly and so unpredictably. And when we are physically distant from one another and we are experiencing the world mediated through our news cycles, we can often find that cycle is just continuing because that is what propels us to continue to pay attention. And one of my teachers reminded me very recently that one of the things that we can do as spiritual practitioners is take control over what it is we allow into our minds, what kind of things we expose ourselves to, not as a means of bypassing. This is not about pretending that things aren't as they are. It is about asking and engaging in free choice, making choices about what it is that I'm going to be exposing myself to, and how and in what measure. And that there may be times in which I am very worried, very anxious. But how much space am I going to give that anxiety in my mind? And as someone who struggles with anxiety, this is not an easy thing to do. I am speaking from a place of deep lived experience and not a place of abstraction. This is not an easy practice to cultivate, but it is absolutely necessary. And our Jewish calendar, I think one of the most amazing things that it does is it gives us as a people different times of the year to really experience and explore different parts of the spiritual journey. Because we know that for a holistic spiritual life, that means that all emotions are part of it. From simcha, from joy externally, from osher, which is that inner joy that we need to cultivate, to sadness and brokenness and sorrow and everything in between. Hashem has given us all these different emotional experiences because that's part of what it means to be a full human in the world. And those of us who are living in Western cultural contexts that are not great at holding feelings and grappling with feelings have this beautiful offering that we can lean into that our people have had for thousands of years of inviting us to inhabit all of the feelings in ways that are productive, in ways that are helpful, in ways that allow us to move through them. So Rosh Chodesh Tammuz is beginning. For some of us, it may already be Rosh Chodesh because we have 30 days of the month of Sivan. The 30th day of Sivan and the first day of Tammuz are both Rosh Chodesh. We have a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. And Tammuz is a month that tells us a variety of things. The summer, for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, is here. For those of us who are dealing with cicadas, we have been made very aware that summer is truly here by the songs that we're hearing constantly every day. I'm speaking to you from right outside of Washington, D.C. So those of us who have the cicada music to accompany our practice are well aware of the changing season. But in our Jewish calendar, in addition to letting us know that it's the summer, we're also reminded that the 3 weeks are coming. And the 3 weeks are a period in our calendar from the 17th of Tammuz, so just over 2 weeks, from the 17th of Tammuz and through the 9th of Av. And this is a period of collective national mourning. Traditionally, the 17th of Tammuz is a minor fast day, meaning from dawn until dusk or until nightfall. And the 9th of Av is traditionally a 25-hour full fast. It is the most somber day of the year. And this was a period of time that was originally focused exclusively on remembering the destruction of both of the temples, the first by the Babylonians and the second by the Romans. And over the last 2,000 years, unfortunately, there have been additional tragedies, as we know, that have been added to this observance of national mourning. But on a deeper spiritual level, in addition to really observing that national mourning and trying to understand or really live into the brokenness in the world, what does it mean to have brokenness in our souls, in our lives, in our world, in our communities? It's also really an opportunity to, I believe, and this is my own insight, to really allow us to sit productively. And when I say productively, I don't mean in any kind of outcome-driven way, but in a way that's very healthy with the feelings that we may be experiencing that are hard. Because as spiritual practitioners, sometimes it's really easy to say, if I'm feeling this really intense feeling of hatred or of whatever it is, depression or just resentment, all these different really hard emotions, these 3 weeks really allow us to sit with the totality of what is yet still to be redeemed in the world. And then to ask ourselves the questions about what are the ways in which we can do a tikkun journey, a repair. And repair does not mean return necessarily to how things were or how we wish they were, but it's instead about asking ourselves to really allow our lives to speak for us. What are the ways in which in our own spiritual journeys we can repair what is broken in our own selves and in our own lives so that we can show up in communities and in our lives as fully and authentically and groundedly as possible. And I want to very, very quickly, before we move into some sitting, bring in a teaching by the Piazetzna Rabbi, Rabbi Shapira, who was known mostly as the rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto, but he also wrote numerous svarim before that. And one of those is called B'nai Machshava Tova, which was the third, I believe, in a trilogy of svarim about becoming a deeply spiritual person and building a spiritual chabura. And in this particular sefer, there's a parak Yud Aleph, that talks about feelings. And the Piazetzna invites us into thinking about what happens when we have a feeling arise. It's a sensation of some kind. We may not know what to do with it. And he talks about in this parak, in this chapter, maybe I need to have a snack. This was written over a century ago, and yet it is so relevant to us. Maybe I need to have a snack or a drink or a nap. I'm feeling this feeling arise and I don't know what to do with it. Okay, so let me find something external that I can use to numb that or to make it go away. And how many of us do that? I certainly do. And the PSX is inviting us to say, actually, no, that's not what we need to do when these emotions and these sensations arise. But in fact, every single feeling that we have is a mafteach. It's a key to our neshama, it's a key to our soul, and it's our soul speaking to us, crying out to us for attention. Our responsibility and job then is to give our neshamas, our souls, the attention they are craving, which manifests through a variety of experiences and sensations and feelings. Whether they are fleeting or more permanent, it is a message from our neshama that we need to pay attention to and sit with and honor and reflect upon. And so as we move into about 10 minutes of sitting practice together, I invite us into a noticing practice where what we're going to do is really just, we can anchor in the breath, we can anchor with a sound, or we can anchor with whatever we have used as an anchor in the past that works well for us. And as we experience sensations of pleasant, unpleasant, might be physical, maybe the environment around us, or as we experience those internal sensations that arise when our minds inevitably wander, we notice them and we take account of them. We let them arise and fall away, and we notice that they are keys, matachot, to our neshama. What is our neshama crying out to us for? What is our life telling us that we need to be attentive to as we move through these next couple of weeks and into the 3 weeks and into that period of brokenness and crying out? So I invite us to sit together and just notice. Things arise and fall away, and notice the various keys to our neshama arise and fall away. So we'll sit together for about 10 minutes. And in our last couple of minutes, I invite us, when our mind is inevitably going to wander, to bring it back with gentleness and compassion as we notice what arises and falls away. So we'll sit together for about another minute or two. I invite us to return to our seat, to our space, to bring us back, bring ourselves back. Thank you all for your beautiful practice and your beautiful kavanot this day. And it was a true bracha to practice with all of you. And I will now turn it back to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Friends, we always seal our practice by offering an opportunity for those in mourning or observing yard sites, or if you're carrying a grief today, to express that through Mourner's Kaddish, and invite you to use the chat box if you'd like to share the name or names of anyone who you're holding in your heart today. And I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join me for Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi.
Amen.
Yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. Chayechon u'gumechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'bizman karif. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach lam v'lamei
Amen.
hamayah. Yitbarach tabach ha'ar v'lam v'yitnaseh. Yitadar v'yitfaleh v'yitbalal kusham v'yitchol. Ve'ela min kol birkata v'shirata. Tushchata v'nechamata. V'amiran ba'alma amru.
Amen.
Ishlama Rabba Yitchapea. Imalenu Yahweh. Yisrael B'mir Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mamlech. Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael. V'yakol Yoshvei Tevel. Amen.
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 Thank you so much to Rabbi Lauren Tuchman for a beautiful teaching today, and invite those of you who are able and interested to stay on for a few minutes of conversation with Rabbi Tuchman. Of course, we're thanking Doreen Goldman for sponsoring our week of practice this week in loving memory of Rabbi Rachel Cowan. Zichronah Livracha, may her memory be a blessing through the merit of this practice and through all that you do in this world. Just a reminder to sign up if you haven't, to join us on June 21st for our evening of gratitude. And I'm going to put into the chat box Rabbi Lauren Tuchman's website, which is rabbituchman.com. And Lauren mentioned that she's currently teaching a course on commentaries on the Torah portion by women. Registration's open for that. That's through our friends at Applied Jewish Spirituality. So check that out as well. If you're leaving us now, we hope you'll join us tomorrow. We'll be led in practice by Cantor Heather Batchelor, joining us from Montreal. And on Friday by Sabrina Sojourner, who will be back to lead us as we sit into Shabbat on this coming Friday. Both days, as Rabbi Tuchman mentioned, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, tomorrow and Friday. So please join us to move into the summer, move into Tammuz with practice at this time. Thanks to Adi Stein, as always, of course, for holding our space with skill and with grace. And I don't mean to be a rhymer. If you're leaving us now, please have a wonderful rest of your day. Be safe and well. And we hope to see you tomorrow. If you do have a question for Rabbi Lauren Tuchman, please put it in the chat box and practice it with question in all caps if possible. Lauren, there's a lot to unpack in your teaching. I'd like to kind of do a little review. First of all, you reminded us about where we are in the Jewish cycle, and it occurred to me, of course, that the Jewish calendar is the original soul cycle. It's really about the journey of the soul individually and collectively throughout the year. So bringing our awareness to where we are in the year and what is happening in the soul, I just want to thank you for that. And to point out that, a little less than 3 weeks from now will be the 17th of Tammuz, which introduces this period that you described as the 3 weeks, which culminate in Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, commemorating the destruction of not one but both temples in Jerusalem. And then you brought the Piazetzner's teaching about our emotions, our feelings as maftechot, as keys to our soul. That's what actually gave me the thought about, Jewish calendar as soul cycle, the original soul cycle. So here's the question that's at the end of that recap, but I want to make sure I got the recap right also. So if our emotions are keys to our soul, or an expression of what's happening in our soul, and the emotions that the calendar seems to be inviting us to are really challenging emotions. We're entering into the summer, which we think of as, for many of us, that's the high point of the year, or, the loveliest time of the year. Not necessarily for everyone, but for many. But in the Jewish calendar, there's some tough stuff that happens over the summer that really leads us into the high holidays, as we're reminded by Rabbi Alan Liu in his wonderful book. So the question here is about if emotions are keys to our soul, what are we looking forward to in Tammuz? What are the emotions, and what do we have to learn from those if we apply our mindfulness practice to it?
Yeah, I love that question, Mark. Thank you so much. And I think what we have to learn in Tammuz, specifically as we move through the end of Tammuz and into Av, is that if we're being honest with ourselves as complex human beings, we're going to feel really hard emotions. And I think particularly as Jews who live in Western contexts that are very feelings averse contexts, right? I love what you said about the soul, our calendar is the original soul cycle. I love that idea. And I think that we would be in a much healthier place globally if we had tools to get in touch with those things that were really hard as Valerie Carr talks about in her incredible book, See No Stranger, which if you haven't read, I really recommend it. And she talks about doing so in safe containers. And that's what the 3 weeks are. They are a temporal container for all of that. They're a temporal container for the mourning and for the grieving and for the broken and for the shattering. Because then, as you were saying with Rabbi Alan Liu, Zichrono Livracha, moving out of Tisha B'Av, we have the 7 Shabbatot of comfort, moving us through Elul when Hashem is in the field to Tishrei, which is like the spiritual high point of the year, because we're not meant to stay in those emotions forever. We're meant to be able to be with them safely so that we can rebuild again. And every year I always think to myself, the 3 weeks, it always feels so relevant in a different way. And I know that that's not true for everybody. I jokingly say that I am a very unique person and that I think the 3 weeks are some of the most spiritually important weeks of the year. I know that that's not true for everybody, but for my own spirituality, it's very resonant. And I do believe that that rebuilding spiritually that we engage in every year is different. I thought last year was the pinnacle. I like, how could I have ever experienced the 3 weeks more deep with tragedy than these 3 weeks last year? But yet, this year, there are yet more things to unearth and more things to mourn in a way that, again, is contained and moving us into a new way of being through the rest of Av. That's why Av is called Menachem Av, because that is that comfort. Shabbat Nachamu. Every single Haftarah from Shabbat Nachamu through the end of Elul is about comforting, one more comforting than the next.
Thank you for that, Lauren. So, first of all, some people may be familiar with the 3 weeks, and I'm sure there are a number of people here for whom that's a new concept and what that is. It really marks this period, like on a historical level, it marks the period between the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. So it's really a kind of a period of breaking, of a breaking down and allowing ourselves to break down and to experience that. I'm thinking about it in terms of the pandemic as we, there's a lot being written and spoken about emerging from the pandemic and realizing that, it doesn't just mean we're going back to where we were, going back to, quote, normal, but that there's a lot that is going to arise to the surface for us, a lot of feelings, a lot of thoughts, a lot that has been locked up beneath the surface that is going to arise, seems like right on schedule this summer. In addition to awareness that, while things may be changing here in the US, but first of all, we have a lot of people here, not in the US or North America, but around the world who join us. And we can be acutely aware that the reality here in the US is not shared necessarily everywhere in the world, and that there's tremendous grief and suffering being experienced right now around the world. So all of which is to say that we may have period, you were describing it as anxiety and fear, and I'm just tacking onto that list, grief, as emotions which may arise over this period. And you're inviting us, what I hear you inviting us to do is to really allow ourselves to be open to those feelings. And there was a question I want to lead into that someone posed in the chat box here, because you spoke about that which arises and falls away. And so part of allowing those feelings to arise within us is the understanding that they will also fall away. So there was a question there, like, what did you mean? What do you mean when you're using that phrase? Allow to arise and fall away.
Yeah, so I'm really grateful that you brought onto that list grief and suffering, because that is so crucially important. And even those of us in the United States who are experiencing a new, and those of us outside of the United States who are experiencing a new phase of the pandemic, even that is uneven, because it doesn't erase the grief of the past 16 months. So when we talk about feelings arising and falling away, we're talking about not getting caught up in cyclical patterns that kind of spin out. I imagine that many of us have experienced this, right? It is not about letting go of the true harshness of the past 16 months and the ongoing grieving and suffering that are being experienced, but it's about figuring out how to catch ourselves and not allow ourselves to be spinning out into unproductive cycles that only reproduce themselves, so that we can really work with the foundational feelings beneath them.
A lot of wisdom there. Thank you. just, I don't know if you have it handy, but if you do, there's a request, I know, for the source or connection to the Piaseczner Rebbe's teachings about emotions. So if you know
Yes,
where to direct people.
I unfortunately don't have the link, but I can tell you it is in a book called B'nai Machshava Tova, which in English translation, there's a beautiful translation available on Kindle called Conscious Community by Rabbi Andrea Cohen Keener. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. It is chapter 11.
Great.
There's another translation on, I don't remember what it's called, but it's by, I think his name is Yaakov David Shulman, and that might also be available on Kindle. Both of those translations are quite excellent of B'nai Machshava Tova.
Great. Okay, Lauren, I think we're going to leave it at that for now. But I do want to thank you so much, as always, for leading us in practice. And I'm glad that you are going to be among the teachers who we're honoring on June 21st. I don't know if you're able to be there or not.
Yes.
I hope you are. But in any case, I know that I'm thinking of you among the many other teachers who have so generously been here to offer guidance and support and wisdom in these challenging times. And we're all grateful for what you've brought to this practice and to this community of practice. So thank you so much for being here again, as always, and we'll hope to see you soon and wish you a Chodesh Tov, a good Tammuz, and a good soul cycle.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to everyone. It's really been my honor to be a teacher, so thank you.
Thank you. Isn't this an easier soul cycle also?
It really is an easier soul cycle. Absolutely.
This is a lot, right. This is very relaxing. Okay, everyone. Hope to see you tomorrow for practicing with Cantor Heather Batchelor and Friday with Sabrina